Now let me introduce the panel because we have three panelists that are coming from very different perspectives for a conversation building on the two overview presentations. Elif Erkul is an associate vice president at sales and structuring for TCX Fund, where she supports the origination of local currency pipeline for impact lenders and works on the optimization of the capital structure of local borrowers when it comes to hedging solutions that TCX Fund provides. She focuses regionally on Central Asia, Caucasus, and Oceania. Mr. Nasser Massoud is the founder and managing director of Concept Realisation, a niche PPP advisory practice with over 20 years of operations. Nasser is also the chair of the social sector PPPs of WAPPP, one of our co-sponsors, the World Association of PPP Professionals and PPP Units. And Nasser has worked for the AfDB, the Korean Ministry of Health, and UNICE, and he's a member of the board of directors of several for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. And finally, our third panelist is Mr. Joao Reye Sabino, who is an senior infrastructure finance specialist at the Global Infrastructure Facility hosted by the World Bank, where he focuses on transport and energy in Africa, Latin America, and Eastern Europe. And before working with GIF, he was with the IFC Corporate Transaction Advisory Team in Brazil. Great to have the three of you today. The plan is to have a conversation around some of these topics, but first I want to ask each of you to do a very brief presentation of your organization so that the participants can understand where are your comments and your experience coming from in that process. So I want to start first with Elif. Elif, tell us a little bit about the TCX Fund.
Good morning, afternoon, good evening, everyone. And yeah, thank you to MCDF for organizing the workshop and giving the stage to discuss the hot topics in relation to PPPs. We refer local currency as a hot topic simply because it is the key to many of the challenges in structuring PPAs and development finance as a whole. And to give an introduction on TCX, local currency is in fact the bread and butter of the fund, actually. So TCX is a development finance initiative which was funded in 2007 and we're based in Amsterdam, Netherlands. And the initial idea of the fund was to centralize the currency risk management on behalf of the development finance institutions. So therefore, with the investment of several DFIs and MDBs, such as EBRD, IFC, FMO, as well as the support of some European states and the European Commission and other private impact fund managers, TCX has been offering currency hedging solutions for more than 70 currencies across the globe. So any country that's in OECD's DAC list is an eligible country for us to offer our solutions. And what we do is pretty straightforward. In fact, we have very plain vanilla products. So TCX provides non-deliverable cross-currency swaps and non-deliverable FX forwards as hedge instruments. And we mainly work with international lenders to foster long-term, up to 20, 30 years, local currency financing into developing economies. And in some cases, we can directly work with local clients to provide the hedging solutions to help them manage their asset and liabilities and other exposures that they may have. And by offering such long-term hedging products, which is not available elsewhere, TCX builds up an offshore yield curve for the very illiquid currencies and opens up market accessibility, both for investors who would like to get exposure in EM and frontier markets, and also for the local borrowers who are looking for external funding and connect with the IFIs. And by developing these hedging instruments, TCX also contributes to the development of capital markets because we can also support bond issuances in local currency and bring international investors to invest in these bonds, but also facilitate other source of debt financing. And we also create an offshore and eventually an onshore hedging market as well, because in some cases, if a local client has access to TCX, they can also offer our products to their local clients as well. So we connect the offshore and the onshore market. Excellent. And the TCX maybe I stop here and
Right.
then.
That's a fantastic overview. Great set of products. I'm sure that the audience will be coming to your website to learn more about that process, and we'll get into the details in the next
Yep.
questions. Let me pass it on to Nasser because not everybody in the audience knows what is WAPP. If you can say a few words about the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals.
Thanks. And thank you very much again for the opportunity for WAPP to be on this call. WAPP, or the World Association of PPP Units and Professionals, is an institution that was founded back in 2018, so about 6 years ago, and is registered as an NGO in Switzerland. It has its seat in Geneva. WAPP is basically the home for PPP professionals. It's a multi-stakeholder network that brings together PPP professionals from different PPP units, from infrastructure agencies, from consultancies, from individual freelance consultants, and so on, funds, and so on. So really, everybody who's a stakeholder in the PPP is able to be a part of the World Association, so of WAPP. And the whole objective is really to create a learning forum. So to learn from each other, create better PPPs, ultimately that deliver value. And one of the things that the founders really observed is that there was no such forum. There were various kind of sporadic things, but this really had a place. And we've seen huge growth in memberships and so on, and also in activity of WAPP since its formation. So if you look at our website, wapp.net, it tells you that we harness the power of a global network for better public-private partnerships. So the kind of things we do, we network. So our members connect and they promote projects, identify business opportunities and the like. And to facilitate that, we have various chapters, what are called chapters. So you mentioned I am the chair of the chapter on social sector PPP. So that covers health, education, elderly care, affordable and social housing, government services and amenities and the like. And that's really where my own passion lies. Hence, I'm taking on this leadership role. I'm also, because I'm mostly based in Dubai, I'm also on the leadership team of the Middle East, North Africa region. So we have, if you like, sector groups, and we have regional groups. So there's a South European, there's an African chapter, and so on. So members who join WAPP really have the facility to then start to participate in different chapters, depending on their sector interest and depending on the theme that they're interested in. There's a full list if you go onto our website. Of course, we engage, we organize webinars. I just facilitated, I moderated a webinar Friday last week on small-scale PPPs in education. There are webinars on all sorts of topics that can appeal in terms of interest to different people. And of course, we inform, we have news and articles and a regular publication, the PPP Times, and we act as an advocacy. So we network our resources and incubate new approaches and so on for public-private partnerships. That in a nutshell is WAPP. Please, everyone, visit the website.
I hope everybody joins WAPP after this seminar. Thank you so much for that great introduction. And let me go to Joao for a brief introduction of the Global Infrastructure Facility and its products, its roles, its objectives.
Thank you, Eren. Thank you, MCDF, for the invitation to join this panel. It's great to be with you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I think I'm from the Global Infrastructure Facility. The Global Infrastructure Facility is a global collaboration platform. We're dedicated to supporting developing countries in mobilizing private capital to infrastructure. The GIF was established 10 years ago. We are a G20 initiative, and the GIF was basically established based on the assumption that the main bottleneck for infrastructure development is actually the lack of bankable projects coming to the market. And we already heard the importance of this for infrastructure development. So we basically provide funds, strategic and hands-on technical expertise to countries, and we do that in partnership with the multilateral development banks to prepare projects in infrastructure. We currently have 11 MDB partners working with us, focusing and using mostly two instruments, a pre-feasibility instrument. So basically helping governments into assessing at early stage what are the bottlenecks and critical obstacles to develop infrastructure. And a second project with a component of fully supporting project development from due diligence, transaction structuring, and support bidding implementation, tender documents, engagements with the market roadshows. So to help promote investment opportunities in countries we work with. And we also have a knowledge agenda. So there's important toolkits that we've been developing in partnership with PPIAF and the World Bank on the climate gender elements. And we also are currently doing a work within the context of the G20 on mitigating foreign exchange rate risk. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but thank you.
Thank you, Joao, for that brief introduction. And let me now go to Elif to really talk about not only the instruments that TCX provide, but also to reflect when you're coming to a country, what are some of the conditions that is important for them to have in order for the TCX hedging instruments to work really well, to help with all of the risk that we have been talking on interest rates, on foreign exchange, you name it. When you go to either your countries on Central Asia or the Caucasus, and you sit down with governments, what do you recommend that they really need to put in place to make sure that the hedging instruments work well?
Well, thanks for the question. I think the hedging instruments work well in any market that is open to facilitate this. So obviously it starts from the policy changes, right? You have to raise awareness that there's need for local currency and hedging. So I think if we take a step back to see why we're talking about local currency and hedging. So T6 wouldn't exist if there was no topic of local currency. And the concept that TCX aims to solve is so-called the original sin, which refers to the fact that most current countries, especially in the emerging markets, cannot borrow in their own currency. And we see that at a given year, on average, developing market currencies tend to depreciate almost 20% against dollars. So historically, the empirical evidence suggests that if you're in a more vulnerable economy, your currency will depreciate. So that's a given fact. So this is the starting point. We need to raise awareness that, first of all, the FX risk is there, it's significant. And when we're discussing about, especially in the PPPs, the sectors are infrastructure, housing, energy, these require long-term financing. So they also need to understand when we dollarize an economy through project financing, then we just put more pressure on the FX. So historically, the PPP focused on the more sectors which are challenging for local currency, right? So these sectors have been dollarized mainly through dollar index offtake agreements, and it was considered that there were no feasible alternatives to hard currency financing. So raising awareness not only focus on that, we emphasize on the fact that, okay, these economies are more vulnerable against shocks and they bear the effects, and this causes a systemic risk, but also that there are alternatives. We can offer long-term local currency solutions. So this is the part of the advocacy work that T6 also does. So local currency actually has become more of a default choice in financial sector, while other sectors, unfortunately, are lagging behind, namely energy, agri-food, infrastructure. So when we're talking about PPPs, we mostly talk about these sectors as well. But this doesn't mean that having local currency denominated PPAs, for instance, is not an option. This is becoming more of a more common practice, but again, there is still a big gap. And in today's development space, local currency is no longer a constraint, and markets have better infrastructure and increased awareness. And this is a consequence of the sovereign and global crisis that we've been going through. So T6 started in 2007, and since then, there were numerous crises that we also went through, but we were still able to show hedging prices and offer the products. So this exists, this option exists. And additionally, most of the international investors have access to TCX as well. So our shareholders are the large MDBs and DFI. So all the familiar names in the impact sector have access to TCX, in fact. So the biggest challenge is sometimes there is a miscommunication or disconnect, right? Because the lenders would know that, okay, we work with TCX on the hedging side, and we know that these lenders can offer local currency, but sometimes this doesn't get communicated to the end client, so the local clients. So this is where we really focus on the advocacy as well. So we need to address to the entire value chain. So there are multiple products available, right? So we're talking about hedging, we talk about the guarantees, credit enhancements. So these can be structured. And also one of the complications is how the product actually works, because the products we offer are non-deliverable. So in a very typical structure, the loan agreement in local currency would be a so-called synthetic structure as well. So we also try to explain the clients how the structure works, because this means that the cash flows in the loan agreement will be in fact in local currency, but the payments are in